We continue to read in the Gospel of John. We're looking at Jesus' post-resurrection appearances, and we have a very interesting one in this 21st chapter of John. We meet the disciples exactly where Jesus first meets them. So in the Gospel of, actually not in the Gospel of John, but in the Gospel of Matthew and Luke, Jesus meets his disciples on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. In the Gospel of John, that's where he meets them for the last time. Very interesting. Here we go, starting at verse 1. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he showed himself in this way. Gathered there together were Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, "I am going fishing." They said to him, "We will go with you." They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, you have no fish, have you?" They answered, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on some clothes, for he was naked, and jumped into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, only about 100 yards off. When they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there with fish on it and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. And though there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now, none of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to Jesus, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and go wherever you wished, but when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After all this, Jesus said to Peter, "Follow me." Well, as many of you know by now, I am the oldest of three boys, and I've always kind of half thought that my dad worried about me more than he worried about my brothers. I was the firstborn. I was his namesake. Maybe it was a little more important for him that I turn out okay. Now, I say this for lots of reasons, but the thing that stands out most for me is I was the only one my dad routinely got jobs for. And every single job he got for me was loud and dirty and smelly and sometimes a little scary. One job was working in a truck yard on a steam rack. So my job during the summers was to stand out in the sun all day in rubber boots in the heat using superheated water to blow grease off truck parts so the mechanics could work on them. Every once in a while I got to clean a Coke truck, and I don't mean a truck carrying a very popular soft drink. I mean a truck that was used to haul petroleum Coke. How many of you know what petroleum Coke is out there? One. Okay, you do not want to drink this stuff. Petroleum Coke is a super fine, super black byproduct of oil refining. So imagine I don't know, taking a chunk of charcoal and grinding it to the consistency of flour, like bread flour. That's Coke. It is so fine that if it touches you, either in wet form or dry form, it will actually go into your pores, which is not going to make you sick, thank goodness, but you can scrub all you want and you're going to be dirty for a few days after coming into contact with petroleum coke. Every now and then he'd check in with me. He said, "Hey, how's the job going?" "Good, Dad. Fantastic." He says, "You want to do that for the rest of your life?" I said, "No." "Well," he said, "at least now you'll have something to fall back on." And this was our pattern for years. One time he got me a job at a chemical manufacturing plant making fertilizer and explosives. The stuff I was working with was a super powerful oxidizer. So it would rust whatever metal you had on your body in a matter of hours. You never put change in your pocket because at the end of the day, you lift that change out and nobody wants to take that for anything you want to buy. It's all green, whatever color, the oxide of that metal is, that's the color it was. It would eat through leather boots in a number of days. So we were, back in rubber boots, which is great fun on asphalt in the summer. And it also had a tendency to make your skin feel gooey. I was grateful for the job, don't get me wrong. Had lots of fun, learned how to drive a forklift, learned how to load a truck, learned how to do all kinds of fun stuff. My dad would call me up and say, "Hey, Rob, how's the job going?" And I would say, "Good." And he'd say, "Hey, you want to do that for the rest of your life?" And I go, "Not really, Dad." And he'd say, "Well, at least now you have something to fall back on." Not exactly encouraging words from one's father, I always thought. The worst job I ever had, or the best job I ever had, was when my dad got me a job working in a mine. One day my foreman came up to me and said that he had a job for me and that I wasn't going to like it, but he was willing to pay me double time to do it, and I could take my lunch and he'd pay me through lunch. So that's about 2.5 hours of extra pay for literally not doing any extra work. But I asked him what we had to do. And what we had to do, my journeyman and I, was to go to the bottom of a shaft and replace a malfunctioning pump at the body of this shaft that had been used for at least 6 months prior as a latrine. Yeah, my hand to God. And, suspiciously, my dad, who was the project manager, knew exactly that I was the guy who got picked for that job. "How'd the job go today?" "Well, Dad, it was like dying and going to hell, if you must know, "Want to do it for the rest of your life?" "Seriously, Pop, you're actually asking me that?" He said, "Well, at least you'll have something to fall back on if nothing else works out." I mean, what? Dad, at the bottom of like a potty for the rest of my life? What? I mean, come on. Well, when I got into seminary, he stopped asking me that, thankfully, but he also stopped getting me jobs, so, But to be honest, I really appreciated my dad doing all this for me. I learned a lot. I met a lot of super interesting people. I made really good money. Wouldn't trade it for the world, but it just always seemed like my dad was making 100% sure that I had a plan B lined up if my plan A didn't work out. You know what I'm saying? Maybe dads are like that for their firstborns. I don't know. What's so interesting about our gospel story today is the disciples are doing exactly the opposite. They're shifting back to plan A because plan B isn't quite working out for them. For 3 years, they followed Jesus. They ate, slept, walked, prayed with Jesus. They saw him do miracles, walk on water. They saw him turn water into wine. They saw him raise people from the dead, not once, but at least twice. And now they've seen him 2 times after his resurrection. And in answer to everything they've experienced for 3 years plus with Jesus, they decide to do what? To go back to fishing, which is exactly what they were doing before Jesus asked them to follow him. Our reading tells us how from these very shores Jesus met them the first time and called them into Plan B, fishing for people. Now, back where it all began, it seems like it's time to fall back on what they know best. Everything else they've tried hasn't really worked out, and so they're going to return to their nets. And can I just say here how much better they were at Plan B than Plan A? I mean, they had their successes fishing for people, did they not? The Gospels of Mark and Luke both describe how Jesus sends them out 2 by 2, and they discover they can drive out demons in Jesus' name and heal the sick and bring people into the family of faith through the gospel. They can fish for people and catch them. But how about for fishing? We've only seen them, fishing twice, and they got shut out both times, right? The first time, 0. Jesus says something to them. Now they catch fish. And this last time, they're fishing, still no good at it. Sorry, they aren't. And Jesus says something to them, and only 100 yards from shore, they pull in a record catch. So this guy from shore tells them to cast their nets over the right side of the boat. And just like the first time, they catch more fish than they can possibly pull in. And then, and only then, does one person realize it's Jesus. This is the crucial part of the story, as far as I'm concerned. Because 3 significant things about Jesus and about the life Jesus calls us to are revealed in this one moment of this last story of Jesus with his disciples. And I believe they have as much to do with us now as they had to do with Peter and his fishing crew. One thing we learn here is Jesus is not always immediately recognizable. Like Lisa said in her meditation, is Jesus always there? Yes. Can we always tell that Jesus is there? Well, let's read on. Jesus, in his appearances to his friends after his resurrection, is for some reason unrecognizable. Remember Mary at the tomb? Jesus is standing right in front of her having a conversation. She can't tell it's Jesus. She even suspects he's the gardener. He's a garden worker. She even asks him where Jesus' body is, and she'll take it away. She's talking to him. But something happens, right? What happens? Jesus says her name, and just like that, she knows exactly who she's talking to. It's a little weird, right? Why is that? It's because her perception is affected by her belief that it's impossible to see Jesus again. If you have seen somebody die by Roman crucifixion, and by the way, if you're wondering, no, nobody ever survives Roman crucifixion. So she knows he's absolutely dead, and then he's absolutely standing in front of her, alive as anybody. Yeah, she probably wouldn't, her brain wouldn't spool up quite fast enough to go, oh yeah, that's Jesus, the guy I saw die just a day and a half ago. No. So, what? Is she blinded by grief? Maybe. The Bible doesn't say. What the Bible does say is that Mary is not the only person this happens to. Looking right at Jesus and not knowing who he is. You remember the story of the 2 disciples walking away from Jerusalem Easter morning. It's famously called the Walk to Emmaus. And these 2 guys are on their way home bemoaning the fate of Jesus, and they say one of the most heartbreaking sentences in all the Bible. They say to Jesus, we hoped he would be the one to redeem Israel. So their hearts are breaking as they explain to Jesus how disappointed they are in him. If he were the true Messiah, he would have never died. Okay. So when they finally get home, it's late. They invite Jesus to stay the night. He accepts. And because he is, a guest, they allow him to say the prayers over the bread. And as soon as he breaks the bread, what happens? Boom. He's Jesus. And what happens next? He's gone. Like Mary and the Emmaus travelers, the disciples here on the lakeshore don't recognize Jesus at first. And okay, we'll give them a little credit. They are 100 yards offshore. So maybe they just can't see that far. I don't know. But it's important for us to recognize when they do recognize him, they recognize Jesus in the miraculous catch of fish. Why? Because that's how they remember first bumping into Jesus. Is it miraculous? Well, yeah, I think so. But what's highlighted in the story is how big it is. And we happen to know how many fish they caught. 153. That's almost 250 pounds of fish. The second thing about this story is Jesus is recognized in abundance. Okay? He's not immediately recognized, but when is he? In this story, it's in abundance. They don't catch enough fish simply to have breakfast with Jesus on the seashore, right? They catch enough fish to have breakfast with Jesus on the seashore for a month. I mean, that's how many fish they catch. So Jesus is not always recognizable, but he is always present and powerful. And he makes himself known when he calls us by name, as he does for Mary. He is present in the broken bread of Holy Communion, as he was for the Emmaus travelers. And here he is present in the abundance of the catch. It's not the first time he's done something like this. Remember his first miracle at the wedding at Cana? So they run out of wine, big tragedy, can't do that. Jesus swoops in, kind of told by his mom to, fix things. So he creates more wine out of water, but does he create, a few bottles of the good stuff? No. He creates hundreds and hundreds of gallons of the best wine anybody's ever tasted. How about the multiplication of loaves and fishes? He's got, a few loaves, a couple fish, but as the disciples wonder, how much is that among so many? And Jesus shows them. Now we know there are 5,000 people there. Those are 5,000 men. You add, wives and children, and maybe 25,000 people. And the Bible tells us that they were all fed to completely full, and there were 12 bushel baskets of leftovers besides. Why does he do this? Why is Jesus showing up and doing things like this all the time? Is it to show off? No, it's not to show off. He does it always to make a point. And the point is, why are they fishing in the first place? Why are they fishing in the first place? They believe they have no future fishing for people. And that's why they're back to fishing for fish. They believe they cannot do what Jesus has called them to do. So they've moved from plan B back to plan A. Jesus' message is this: go back to plan B. You're not alone. You can fish for people, and if you trust me, you'll be wildly more successful than you think you can be. This is the third important thing I think this story of the Bible teaches us. The point is driven home in Jesus' conversation with Peter. They've hauled in an amazing load of fish. They've eaten their fill during breakfast on the beach. And now Jesus wants to make sure Peter doesn't miss the point of everything that's happened, right? Do you love me? He asked Peter. Then feed my lambs. If you love me, feed my lambs. He asks again. If you love me, tend my sheep. He asks a third time. If you love me, feed my sheep. What's going on? Jesus is telling Peter to keep doing for others what Jesus has done for them. Fish and catch and feed and heal and forgive and teach. A lot has been made of this back and forth conversation Jesus has with Peter, but I think most of it is simply to drill into Peter's thick skull that he is capable of continuing Jesus' ministry on earth. I can't do it. Yes, Peter, you can. No, I really can't. Yeah, you really can. I really don't think I'm your guy, Jesus. Peter, with my love, you can do anything. You can do anything I ask you if you trust me. You can fish for people. You can catch them. You can change the world. So the message he leaves his disciples is the same message that he leaves with us. That's probably the most important transition. We're not talking about somebody else at another time and wow, wasn't that cool? No. The Bible is always inviting us into the story. How do we get into the story? We're the disciples. We are disciples. We're the only disciples Jesus has in the world. If you're a disciple of Jesus, who was, doesn't count anymore. Who will be, who knows? We, this generation, we are Jesus' disciples. So what he says to his disciples, we can hear as him speaking to us, can we not? Which means, if Peter and the others can trust in Jesus' power and presence, even when we can't sense his presence, we can still find him in abundance. The abundance of his love. And by sharing the abundance of his love, we can change the world, can we not? Yes, we can. By trusting in Jesus' love, by sharing Jesus' love, you can change the world. Now, if this sounds a little much, well, you're in good company, because the first disciples didn't believe they could do it. And that's why Jesus has to show up on the beach, while they've, pulling in their empty nets and reminding them that if they try on their own, they'll fail. But if they try calling on Jesus' presence and power, his love, his abundant life, then wonderful things can happen. Yeah, I get it. A lot of the time, maybe most of the time, we just don't feel like we're up for it. But guess what? The first disciples didn't think they were up for it either. But they were, weren't they? I think they might have psyched themselves out by thinking they had to do what Jesus did exactly the way Jesus did it, when all Jesus was asking them to do is to do what they could by trusting in him. Maybe we psych ourselves out too sometimes. But the gospel isn't a magic trick. It's real life, flesh and blood, sometimes trial and error. It's welcoming the stranger, remembering the forgotten, inviting the outsider, feeding the hungry, comforting the suffering, hanging out with the lonely. Maybe we think that everything we do for Jesus has to be, miraculous, flashy, exciting. Maybe it's simply just loving others the way Jesus loved us, and by sharing Jesus' love, letting him do all the miracles. And when we do that, Jesus' plan B becomes our plan A, and the net gets a little fuller, and more people draw closer to God. With the disciples, Jesus' message is, if you want to sum it up in a catchy tagline, maybe back to the future. Remember fishing for people. Now see it as your destiny. These are Jesus' last words to his disciples in the Gospel of John. And they're his words to us right now. You are not alone. You can fish for people and catch them. And if you'll trust God, you will become more successful than in your wildest imagination. Peter didn't think he was up for any of this. But with Jesus' encouragement, he found that he was. And we are too. You are, I am, all together. We are, if we'll trust. Stories in the Bible are great, and they remind us of important things. But Jesus, in his infinite wisdom, realized that stories alone probably wouldn't be enough. We human beings would need something more to hang on to, something to remember, something to experience bodily, something we could touch and taste and smell and remember. And that's why he set a table for us and invited us all to share it with him. And so, right now, we remember that in the night in which he was betrayed, our Lord Jesus took bread. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and he gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body given for you. Do this for the remembrance of me." Again, after supper, he took the cup. And when he had given thanks, he gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and drink. This cup is the new covenant in my blood, poured out for you and for all people for the forgiveness of sin. Do this for the remembrance of me." And so, we as followers eat and drink and remember, just as Jesus has bid us to do every time we gather around a meal like this. And so, together, let us pray the table prayer that Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.